Elijah, one of the great prophets of the Old Testament, was doing the Lord's work when he was trying to get the false prophets of Baal out of the kingdom of Israel. And he was pretty successful. In fact, 400 of them got slain when they had a contest about who was the true God. But Queen Jezebel, who worshiped Baal, was not satisfied. She wanted to kill Elijah because of his success. And at this point, Elijah felt distraught, depressed. In fact, he even said, "I want to die." That's how down he was. He was doing the Lord's work. But the Lord did not forget him. He sent his angel to give him comfort and led him out of the area to a place of safety. His encounter with the prophets of Baal was in the north, near Mount Carmel. And so where does he go? Where is he led by the angel? Way south to Mount Horeb. And that is where we find him in today's reading. Because now it says, "What am I to do now?" He was told, "The Lord will be present to you, and you will know." So he's asked to wait for the Lord's presence. He was in the cave near Mount Horeb. And how did the Lord appear to him? Not by fire, not by lightning, not by some extraordinary manifestation, but in a tiny whisper. He experienced the Lord's presence, and that's all he needed to continue his work. He was no longer depressed. He had a sense of purpose, and he could continue his work as the Lord's prophet until it was time to hand it over to Elisha. When you look at that, here is a prophet who is depressed, who felt the Lord wasn't there, but he realized he really was. The Lord becomes present in ways often that we do not expect. And that leads us to what occurred in today's gospel. Jesus himself was experiencing some difficult situations as well. We've been listening to the gospel for the last several weeks. A couple of weeks ago, it was his cousin John the Baptist being killed by King Herod. And Jesus just wanted to get away from it all, but he couldn't because the crowds followed him. So last week we heard of how he had multiplied the loaves for the crowds. But he still wanted to get away because he was trying to process all that took place. What is my mission? What is my call? Where's my God in all of this? Well, the way he would do it is get away to pray. Tried to do it a couple of times, but he couldn't. But this time, he told his disciples, "Let me get away. I need this time for myself." So he spent the night in prayer, all night, all by himself, probably on this cave overlooking the Sea of Galilee up in the mountain. But even in the midst of prayer, he noticed something. The disciples that he had left were out in a boat, middle of the night, in the Sea of Galilee. And the Sea of Galilee can be rather unpredictable. It can be totally calm, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, these winds arise. And that is what the disciples experienced. Jesus wasn't going to let them perish. he decided to do something about it. So he went down the mountain from where he was praying, went to the sea, walked along over the waters where the disciples were. And you can imagine, middle of the night, midst of a storm, and you see the figure. It couldn't be Jesus, is it? Then Jesus makes a statement. Now, the way it says it in today's gospel, "It is I, do not be afraid." But it is much more than that, because the actual word in Greek is "I am." Those words recall what took place with Moses when he had the experience of God in the burning bush. And he was given his mission. And so Moses said, "Well, who do I say is doing all of this?" And the Lord said, "I am who am." So when Jesus was making a statement, "Do not be afraid, I am," it's a statement of divinity. It is saying that God is present through and in Jesus. That is why he could walk in the water. That is why he was able to calm the sea. Now, Peter was not quite there yet, as we see. Peter knew it was the Lord, so he says, "Okay, if it's you, Lord, have me come out with you. Let me walk in the waters like you're doing." And so Jesus said, "Okay, go ahead." Peter has always been impetuous. His faith wasn't always quite there. It would happen later on, but at this point, no. He panicked and he sunk. But in the midst of all that turmoil, Jesus extended his hand. And he brought him back on the boat. And the sea was calm. Now, you've heard the story, but let's look at the story behind the story. And that has to do with what Matthew was trying to say when he was relating the story about Jesus and the disciples. Matthew, wrote it long after Jesus had died and risen. And by this time, the disciples of Jesus had grown into a larger community they called the church. And the church itself was going through a lot of storms and turmoil. By relating this story, Matthew is saying to his readers at the time and to us as well, 2,000 years later, that the storm is the world about us. The boat which the disciples are in is the church. And there will be times of storm and turmoil. And if we lose sight of who we are as a church and why we are here as a church, that is, followers of Jesus, who is God made flesh, then we can be lost. What we always need is the steady hand of Jesus. Today, 2020, August, we are certainly in the midst of our own storms. And that has to do with, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic that is around us. And it can be very tempting to be like Elijah and just want to die or roll up into a ball and say there is no hope. Or we can be like the disciples of the sea in the midst of the storm and forget that there is that calming influence of the Lord who can calm our seas, who can get us through all of this. The one who said, I am. Do not be afraid. So let us not be afraid. Let us realize in the midst of all these storms and all these turmoil, we who are in this bark, this boat called the church, have that calming presence of Jesus who extends his hand so that we may be calmed, so that we may be at peace, and that we may know that God is always with us.